We see that our application has duplicate logic in multiple places. For instance, there's this logic here for specifying how to output data to the console, as well as separate locations where we're opening up a connection. Let's look at how we can apply some refactorings to clean this code up as well. We'll start with a fresh copy of our original solution. Here's our code, and we can see that we have our connection strings duplicated as we did before, and we have logic here for dumping things out to the console, which we would like to replace with a single new method. We also have a number of different places where we're doing this connection logic to open up a connection and get back a data table. We're doing that twice here, as well as down here in the fill section, we're opening up a connection, executing a query, and in this case we're doing an execute non-query call, and we're doing that a couple of times. In fact, we're doing it 4 times just in this one method. Now we can extract out this code ourselves, or there are a number of well-proven tools that will do this for us. Let's look at an example tool. The simplest tool would be to add a Northwind data context using link to SQL. So we're going to go add a new item. We're going to use a link to SQL class. We'll call it Northwind. We'll go over to our Server Explorer and we'll drag on the tables that we're interested in. And let's see, we also wanted employees and invoices. We'll set up the property for this. We'll say our entity namespace should be entities, and everything else looks good. Now, if we look at our code, the first thing we're going to do is delete a freight summary. So instead of using a connection, we're going to say using var db equals new Northwind data context. And because we don't have our configuration set up for our connection string, we'll just hard code it for now. And within this data context, we want to first grab the one that we want to delete. So our shipper to delete is going to be from shippers in db.freightsummaries, where shippers.name equals the individual shipper in our loop that we're on, .name, and the date, the run date equals 8time.today. We're going to select the whole record, and we just want the first one. So we'll grab that, and for our first, we'll do that here. We'll say db.freightsummaries, delete on submit, shipper to delete dot first. And we'll go ahead and submit this now. That takes care of this big chunk of code here. Next, we want to insert a new record with the run date and the values from our shipper that we're on. So for that, we'll do basically the same thing. We'll say our shipper to insert is a new freight summary. Now this is our entity freight summary that Link to SQL just created for us. And we will say that its freight is our shipper freight, and its name is our shipper dot name, and its run date is still datetime dot today. And then we want to just do an insert on this. So it's db freight summaries insert shipper to insert, db submit changes. And if we apply this now to this logic here, this is our using statement. You can see it becomes much smaller at this point. And we should be able to run our code and it should work. And it still does. We would do the exact same thing here, but for the sake of time, we won't show that to you. And so that's an example of how we could use Link to SQL in order to eliminate a lot of repeated ADO.NET code. we're still going to see some repetition in this pattern where we're looping through each one of these and doing some kind of a delete followed by some kind of an insert. And we could certainly eliminate that duplication as well using a different refactoring technique. The other duplicate logic that we saw was this output logic up here where we're looping and dumping out this stuff. We actually cleaned that up in our magic strings section, but just for the sake of completeness, we'll show that technique here as well. If we go and we add a method to output the table here, then we can refactor these calls so that they simply say output table with our table name, and the same thing here for our invoices. Taking care to change this, and we only want to show 3 columns for the invoice one. And if we run this, you can see that we're still getting, here are our employees and here are our invoices being output as expected. So we've done that refactoring. Let's look at the next one.